getting to the point fast, which I didn't think I'd be able to do. This video only concerns people who are trying to get federal firearms licensing from the ATF and have seen the line on any part it says involving DDTC ITAR or USML. Those initials are what they stand for. If you're not doing any of that, you have more freedom and can go ahead and do things that would normally be regulated by the rest of the alphabet soup boys here, simply because regulating things doesn't mean making it to where you can't do something. It means you can do something that deserves more scrutiny. Hidden under bureaucratic rules, definitions, logic, and very messy grammar that's caused by evolving rules instead of just retyping them and starting over, certain acts and or individuals doing these acts or involved even tangentially with these acts are regulated or registered or taxed or licensed or any number of other words. By the way, we should simplify the wording down to, a smaller number of, it's a thesaurus of the damned here. This is especially if it is done if you are a manufacturer that transfers and or imports or exports or sells anything, including donuts, to firearms. Food handler licensing is required in many cities because people who don't know how to make food can kill you. It doesn't have to be fugu poisoning. It could be food poisoning. Someone making a firearm and accepting the risk of their own actions, me making a 50 BMG rifle out of water pipe, number one, if I make it, I'm not going to hold the thing when I'm firing it, even if I think it's safe, because that's dumb. But if I sold it to you, they would be implying that you might sell it to someone else who doesn't get the warning or the note, it's made out of water pipe, don't trust it. Obviously, if it involves me even giving it away, regulation on my behavior and actions may be appropriate. Where it crosses the line with some people is if it involves a tax of any kind, even a penny, on principle. But those are the kind of people who don't want you to have food handlers license regulations if there's a nickel involved in it. Obviously, all of this stuff gets paid for by taxes by some way. Or it doesn't get done because someone isn't going to sit there and put up with you and me turning into a Karen demanding to see the manager. Unless they have the right to basically flog people into submission, they're going to want money. Some people honestly would pay for the flogging privileges, but let's not go there. Let's not discuss my, your smother. So anyway, here we go. But are they hiding things in bureaucratic rules, or is it just something that evolved? Now, this is a judgment call, but let's get to it. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, the ATF, issues federal firearms licenses. Type 7 is so that you can manufacture, and it's presumed manufacture means that you could trade it or get money for it. They don't care if it's money involved. Are you making this gun and ammo, and someone else is going to absorb your stupidity making the metal bad? That's the argument from safety. You can argue that back and forth, but let's use that one as an example, just because that's one that's a really good example. Type 7 means you can make firearms and make the ammunition. Also do a bunch of other things, but we're just going to limit it to that for right now. That means you can make anything from a 22 caliber pistol to a 20 millimeter anti-aircraft gun or something. And again, you can make the equivalent as a muzzleloader or a cannon, and it's not regulated at all. But you're applying for a federal firearms license by giving them all the information so you're not appearing to be hiding. And you're saying you can come in and inspect me to make sure that I'm not breaking the rules proactively, which again, you could object to. And it's going to be type 7 so that I can freely make and keep bear arms and ammo and make the cartridges. But I'm doing it so that someone else has to suffer the consequences of my improper manufacturing facility or abilities, or that I made it out of peanut butter instead of plastic or something. Okay? All right. Now, they cite in that Type 7 and many other locations a directorate. Now, we're going to call the ATF just the ATF. We're going to call this directorate the Directorate, but it's called the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls. DDTC, alphabet soup. They are concerned with trade controls on anything that would be used for defense, national defense. Within the United States, internationally, doesn't matter. And they cite a list of munitions on a list, and it's called the United States Munitions List. That list includes, I'm going to be hyperbolic here, but everything from a glue gun nozzle I might just have time to discuss, yes, to an H-bomb, which is somehow, I'm going to explain, very closely related to the glue gun. I'm not kidding. So, because the Directorate, has to put up with that batshit crazy list that has had to be reorganized a lot since Paddock happened, there's a bunch of rule changes that change maybe depending on how you read it. I'm going to go into a grammar example, but let's get to the point at the 6 minute and 10 second mark so I waste less of your time. But this actually was needed. Except for specific cases that they have decided to redefine as manufacturing. An individual, even if they get a license through DATF, is not needing to register with the Directorate here if you're not exporting or importing, even temporarily, or brokering, or acting as a go-between, or manufacturing for the purpose of someone else using it, anything on their controlled item list of defense articles or services. Now that last word, services, along with the word manufacture, needs a little bit of a definition. If I explain to you, I didn't do this in the previous video, if I explain to you why camping items, I'm not saying which ones, are regulated as a munition to make nuclear warheads. If I explain how that's done, I'm offering my services even if I'm not getting anything in compensation. They also put this in here, even if you don't get compensation, if you offer data over the internet in such a way it can cross to, I don't know, any other country, yeah, that's an ITAR violation. If I explain to you exactly how you can enrich uranium, that might put me on a list. Now remember, I already deliberately put myself on a list by walking around being a living recording vessel, or floppy disk as I called myself, a biofloppy, containing information on how to secure your email. At one time, the U.S. government did not want people to make it impossible to read their email. They wanted to read your email. They said so. And they were doing it at one time. Me being an activist put me on a list. I wasn't allowed to leave the country for a while. Pretty long while. I had a restriction on a passport. I still have the passport someplace. The previous one. It looks different, by the way. It really does. But it has to be a controlled item. It has to be labeled as defense important, national defense important. And again, this can be a glue gun or a metal pin that goes in it, by the way, or an H-bomb, or the information on why they work together, which I'm only allowed to hint at. Yeah. Now, how does the Directorate, the DDTC, avoid having you have to register with them? But why would a bureaucracy do that? The ATF is the bureaucracy that gets the address wrong, shows up at the wrong house, shoots a dog and kills a kid, and has qualified immunity because they're reckless, stupid jerks who used to just be tax collectors. The most boring thing you can come up with made into an action hero. You understand what's wrong with this fucking picture? The Directorate of Defense Trade Controls is a bunch of pencil pushers behind desks that are technically required to be able to qualify with a gun once a year. That's a big difference. And also, they don't have qualified immunity. If they do something wrong, they can be held liable and thrown in prison. And they're the ones who have to interpret the ITAR list that includes an H-bomb, or components to make one, or just the precursors to enrich uranium. Let's move on. What do they tell you to do so they don't have to talk to you? If you get a federal firearms license or want to, they tell you not to get it unless you need to. And it's only for commerce. If you're not a commercial reseller or doing something else involving ammunition and weapons at all, don't get the damn thing so they don't have to do it. They only come into play under those conditions, unless, again, you're some stupid YouTuber who says something like, the dimension is actually 1.22 millimeters. That's not the right dimension. If I say the correct dimensions for the pin I'm going to bring up, which I'm not going to, you get the idea. So they don't get involved unless you really do an overt act. They ask you to avoid them needing to regulate you by not drilling, cutting, or machining any components, limiting activities to domestic sale and resale only, and don't make this a 9-to-5 job. Make it occasional activities or hobby almost, and acts. Please just do specific simple activities like part swaps. Nothing beyond the original capabilities it had. Don't change the accuracy and operation of any piece of equipment. Now, they're not mentioning firearms at this point. They're mentioning any damn thing. Glue gun, remember? Beyond the original capabilities. For firearms, that means don't change the chambering, the caliber, the ammunition, stay below 50 caliber or 12.7 millimeter for bore and projectiles. But again, they're talking, well, that's for everybody. Stay in safe space here. But if you get an FFL Type 7, you can avoid them having to talk to you if you do these things too. If I make a gun, don't I have to? Yeah, if you make a gun and put the barrel on it, fine. But if you alter that barrel afterwards, technically you violated a rule here, so you have to make a new barrel and put it on. Or make the barrel perfectly by never mounting it in a gun, and then don't make the gun, and then test the barrel separate from the gun. Do everything best practices for arms manufacturer. Even if you don't need this permit, even if you're not getting an FFL. Act like you're under ATF scrutiny at all times. I've told people to do this, but someone asked me this question. Wait a minute, it says this when you get a federal firearms license through the ATF, the other alphabet soup things have to go in and you have to pay $1,000 or whatever the fuck it is. No, because that department, they're shoveling it to that department. Again, this is the department where they get into trouble for fucking making a mistake or lying to you. The ATF does not. If there's the appearance that it might be something that ever gets exported, they're involved. If it's anything on the prohibited list, they get involved. And honestly, as a private citizen, you don't have any of these restrictions. But if you do not do any of these things, stay below 50 caliber, blah, 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 they can't be implemented retroactively. The ATF, again, was supposed to tax people. The federal firearms license is a tax. If you do an activity that they want to tax, they can use these excuses as well. So until you get really good at this, stay in the civilian area and never even sell it. Because once you sell it, or offer it as a service, or open your mouth on YouTube and maybe violate a rule here. They don't include YouTube here, but they should. Until you do something stupid like I'm doing right now, you're in the safe space and they can't do anything to you. But they can try, they can fuck with your life, they can show up at your house, shoot your dog and your kid, apparently, and get away with it, but they can't prosecute successfully, but they can keep you in courts for 10 years anyway. Again, one organization, the Directorate, can't get away with that shit, so they're telling you how to avoid them. Occasional assembly of firearm parts and kits that do not require cutting, drilling, or machining is acceptable. Don't alter anything. Repairs involving swapping out parts are acceptable. Again, don't do any alteration. Replacement parts that don't change the accuracy beyond the ability of the original device are best practices. An AR-15's range of capabilities is designated. If the company, you notice they say, if you change the barrel out for these other options, changing to those options is there so that you will avoid this. I didn't understand why they would go, well, you can swap out the barrel later or you can use these other designs. They offer lots of different ones. And so they can cover their ass and your ass because you're just swapping out a part. You're not changing the caliber. An AR-15 can have a caliber from, I think, almost 12 gauge all the way down to 17 HMR. It has no restrictions on it. It's a universal receiver. That's where it came from. They had to mention this. Painting it, bluing it, adding decals is not considered modifying the firearm. Yes, there was a rule somewhere that they had to clarify because the ATF doesn't give a shit. They'll arrest you for putting a sticker on there. Manually reloading or loading ammunition. Don't use an automated bench. Even the multi-station one, maybe you should avoid it. So what did this come from? What brought this up? Someone saw that little bit of fine print on an ATF form and freaked out appropriately. Meanwhile, the other people spent 2 years after Paddock happened trying to get rid of this confusion. And they basically just told everybody best practices to avoid the ATF itself. That also includes, if you're not aware of it because of what I'm doing, don't talk about it on the internet. They didn't say it, they implied it strongly, because that's international communication of sensitive data. You notice I didn't bring up the glue gun. I'm not going to. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. But you can look up the list and see which glue gun